Okay, that's my kind of place. All right, well, welcome everyone. It's May 16th, it will be all day, that's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order with rainy glasses. Do we have public comment on any non-agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to review and approval of the meeting notes from April 25th, 2019. I assume everybody's read them copiously. Okay, that's a power word.
That's a very big one.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. Any discussion? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, Mark, because you were not here. All right. Excellent. Information items. Superintendent President's update. I'm going to go quickly just because we have a busy day. So let's see. Since we last were here, as you know from my email, I walked the halls of Sacramento with Jack Scott to try to get support for the Serafian building. When the Governor's May Revise came out last week, it was not included in the list, but that apparently we did talk to Portantino's office and they weren't surprised by that. Apparently the Governor is thinking that the legislature will take care of that issue rather than the Governor weighing in. And so what we know right now is that the Assembly side, the Assembly folks have already voted and added our building to the list. We met with folks on the Senate side, and Senator Portantino is the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and he's very much in favor of our building. We've also talked to the Assembly and Senate budget folks, the folks who actually run that part of the Senate, and we've also talked to somebody in the Governor's office. So it's not possible for anybody else to need to hear from us because we have talked to everyone. So hope springs eternal, and I think we've made a really good argument for the building. In the Governor's May Revise, it's kind of okay news for us. I think, you've probably seen press releases out there. Oh, isn't this a wonderful budget? Yes, well, kind of, not really. Because the student-centered funding formula is theoretically going to be fully funded. The problem is they didn't actually fully fund it for this year. So we're hoping to get money that is owed to us. We should have gotten an additional $6 million. But instead, because of what they're calling, I love euphemisms in the state, the constraint TCR, or total computational revenue, we actually are under by $500,000. There's some hope that we might get some of that money by the end of the year, but who knows? And I think, let's see, June 14th, right? It's on your dance card, everyone. June 14th, 7 o'clock. Stadium graduation. It's going to be awesome, and our featured speaker is the artist Simone Silva. So I think it's going to be great, and I'm so looking forward to it as my first graduation. Any questions or comments? No? All right, so let's move on to academic affairs update. Dr. Junie.
So I'm just going to give an HR update in regard to hiring because we are in hiring season and obviously also starting award season. And so if you all remember, we're going out for 46 faculty positions. We actually have offered, and when I say we, both student services and instruction, we have offered a total of 27 positions so far that the people have said yes. And as of last night's board meeting, 14 of those people now, between the April board meeting and the May board meeting, have been approved by the board. So that means we're like 58% done, which is still a D.
But when you think about the amount of time.
And just to add to that, I mean, basically, I am in a meeting with our new president at least twice, almost every day.
Yes. A lot of face-to-face
time. And that
time.
continues. We have 2 today, 2 tomorrow, 2 on Monday, and so hopefully by the end of next week we'll almost be there.
Yeah.
We do still have a few that will be a little bit further out. We'll also be increasing the numbers because some of the early ones were third-level interviews for single positions, and now we're on the math and English ones and speech where there's multiple positions. So we have to spend a little bit more time together, but we end up with greater numbers of faculty.
But Armenia Galukian, my executive assistant, makes awesome Armenian coffee, so that's good. You're awake.
Yes,
We are
that's very true. And what I'll also say in that regard, I am really excited about the caliber of people that we are offering jobs to and who are accepting and who are very excited to be joining the faculty here at Pasadena City College. So a lot of people that we're hiring, but it's really a great time. So
Yep.
and that will be the
Quite
report.
diverse.
What about the dean position that's going to be open?
There is
Is
a
that anything
dean position open right now that we'll actually be pulling the committee together shortly and starting the process. That's the VAMS position. Was that the one you're asking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that one should actually be closing shortly, and the committee is being formed, and we'll probably be having our first meeting next week to start basically putting the timeline together and start the process. I'm not sure of the exact date that it closes, but it's shortly.
Okay, wonderful. Student affairs update.
Dr. Lebo is in Sacramento this week.
Oh, that's right, at Consultation Council. Oh, yes, I was going to say that under that. So number 4, Business and Administrative Services update. We officially have a Chief Business Officer. Yay! After 4 tries. It's been a bumpy road, but we were able to, when the last candidate in search number 3 had accepted the position and then at the last minute decided to withdraw to take a different position at a different college. I got on the phone, we opened the position again, and I got on the phone, started making some phone calls, and I'm very happy that somebody I used to work with, Dr. Mike Bush at Oxnard College, came and applied, went through the process. Actually, I think there were 16 applications, so we did have a pool after 1 week. We had a pool. There were interviews, and then I interviewed 2 finalists, and he was selected. He comes with a significant amount of experience. He has been at Oxnard College for 7 years as the Chief Business Officer, and prior to that, he was the Assistant Superintendent at Fillmore Unified and also at Santa Paula Unified, so he comes with both K-12 and community college. He actually went to Occidental College for his undergraduate and owned his first house here in Pasadena. So he knows a lot about the area. And exciting for us since we are going to have a culinary program at John Muir. His first career was as a chef. So he also he makes a mean bread pudding, that's all I'm gonna say. And he brews beer, so yay. Dr. Junie and Dr. Bush will have much to discuss in the beer brewing process. So with that, we're gonna go on to old items, discussion and possible action, BPAP 3540, sexual assault, second read, and we'll have Bob Lizinski.
So this is the second time and second time for most of you here regarding this particular AP. So I'm looking for support on it as it's written, although I have received some comments from the Management Association that I'm sure Tito would like to discuss today, or any other questions that you may have. It's gone through most of all of your other committees to get to this point. And so with that, Tito, I know you had some questions, and I will throw it to you, and I will try to explain some of the rationale behind. Well, before we do this, the nature of this particular AP is centered around assaultive behavior and sexual violence, and that is what is required from the Ed Code and the federal legislation that is quoted as its reference in this first part of the references. So that is the reason why we have carved out this particular AP and have not watered it down to include other kinds of sexual misconduct that Tito is going to mention earlier today. So I just wanted you all to know that that's the particular reason why this is carved out, because sexual violence is different and defined differently than other sexual kinds of crimes. and the process for adjudicating those and processing those are different. So that's why that's why it is the way it is and written as a carve-out. So with that, Tito, I didn't want to take away any of your steam,
No.
but I know you guys had some concerns, and so that we chat about them if you'd like.
Yes. At our last business meeting of the Management Association, we had a lot of discussion about all of our APs and BPs listed, and this was one of them that was on the list, and we had a good discussion with it. We have a lot of managers who have experience with this, obviously supporting students in situations like this regarding misconduct. And they were facing certain issues where they couldn't do anything about it because it wasn't an assault. They used a key example of a lewd act, again, flashing, where we couldn't really do anything because it wasn't an assault. There was no actual physical assault. So one of the things that one of our managers mentioned that in other areas where she's been at, they have, it's not just assault, but on the same policy, it's more of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and other assault. So it's all listed under one umbrella. And she did give examples of as far as the definition of it. Again, talking about obviously without having affirmative consent, there's a lot of issues with it. I totally forgot to send it to Crystal, but I did send it to Bob. About, again, having non-consensual sexual contact or attempts to commit the same. Again, listing this under the AP, whereas the BP, obviously it is different, but it would still entail changing some of that to include language where it talks about non-sexual sexual contact, non-consensual sexual contact, non-consensual sexual intercourse, sexual exploitation, and different languages of that we want to see included. Because again, when you look at assault, as Bob and I were discussing in our one-on-one, it's a legal term. Again, it's one that's commonly used. But when you're talking about misconduct, it's not always included in these, but there are institutions that do include misconduct in it, and we would like to see not really them separate, more adding misconduct to this. That way it can have a more stronger thing. And one of the things that we also discussed, while yes, it was on the table as far as just making it its own policy, but for folks who are in the know, again, it's even at the higher level when we're looking at it, it's not in favor of having multiple policies that kind of cover similar things to actually having it all in one. So the MA is in favor of editing this to include sexual misconduct.
Just that word, but not
There's-
subsequent definitions of it.
No,
You want all
we have additional language, and like I said, I got that to Bob, but I totally forgot to give it to Crystal.
Mark.
I don't know how you could add that without having a specific definition of sexual misconduct. What is sexual misconduct?
I can read it for you for the city of Los Angeles, which is different than the city of Sacramento, which is different than the state of Washington.
Yeah, there is no
Right,
agreed
so
upon
when we talk
definition.
about the legal definition, and I brought that because I figured this was going to come up, sexual misconduct is not one specific offense. And I think you noted that. It's a general term used to refer to any sexual crime. While we especially hear the phrase sexual misconduct in regard to workplace allegations, it can include many different alleged sex crimes. So the intent of this is sexual violence, not sexual crime. It's the same thing, that's why we have a sexual harassment carve-out, which is not necessarily always a crime. It's a violation of a policy. It can be a violation of a law, but we carve that out because the process and the penalties associated with sexual violence is much different than it is for, in many cases, sexual harassment, which is in the workplace. So that's the reason why there is the carve-out. So the Ed Code specifically says violence, and violence then is equated to assaultive behavior. So that's the reason why this has been carved out. That's the reason why the Ed Code has carved it out on purpose and didn't generalize it. And sexual misconduct is actually a fairly new word or concept. It is something that has evolved. So I don't know if that, and so I think when we talked about, do we want to have a more generalized policy? I would think that would be the place to do that. I would not want to, this, in my own opinion, water the intent of this particular AP down. And I think we discussed that.
Right, and I don't think it'll be watering it down. If anything, it'll be covering it under a bigger umbrella to include sectional. Well, again, the SOAP pieces would still be in place, it would just be adding the components of sexual misconduct.
So I'm more than willing to throw this in front of the attorneys who wrote this, and that's why I shared with you yesterday, have them take a look, see what they think we can put in and what we can take
Yeah,
out.
I think that's a good idea to have a legal opinion on this, because what we want to do is make sure that that the wording, the definitions are properly inclusive when we need to draw upon them, but that they're not so expansive that something that it's really just a subjective interpretation of an action that, well, it looks like it falls under here, so I would feel better if we did have a legal
And have them take a
consult
look.
on that.
Yep.
So we can take that.
Yes.
And you want me to get a copy to everyone in this group then?
Yeah, I think that would be
So
good.
we'll send out Tito's email, okay, send that your email?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, now I'll send it out to this
Okay,
group then.
and then we'll send it to the attorney and see what they
Yeah.
say.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. All right, update on management appointments to standing committees. Tito?
Yes, something else I forgot to send to Crystal. But again, with this one, again, we discussed this last week, and I think Terry and I had a conversation, and I completely understand where it's coming from, especially again, as you mentioned, it's one I did preface by stating that I want to make sure when I talked with Dr. Jonas the first time, it was more on the wording before. There was many committees that had appointed by management associate in consultation with the president, and she felt like that was unneeded because it's kind of repetitive because she has her appointees. And I jumped the gun and added for all the rest, where included VPI, but it was just for those. But now that we got there, I had a good discussion with Terry, and we're in favor for the calendar committee. Actually, let me back up. For all the other committees, with the exception of the calendar committee and the strategic planning committee, it'll read appointed by management association. Whereas for the calendar committee, it'll read appointed by the vice president for instruction in consultation with the management association. And then the strategic planning is reverse. It will be appointed by the management association in consultation with the VPI. So that'll be the only two changes. Again, I've already emailed it to Crystal, so just like the one with Bob, you'll all get that one, and you also get this one. But that's the only two changes to make sure that we are addressing the constraint of the VPI, which is very valid one. And that is all.
Okay. Some good clarification.
Yes.
Okay, student equity plan, Dr. Michaela Maris Tamayo. Did I say that right?
We practice a lot.
Okay.
Micaela
Oh,
Maris
my
Tamayo,
honor.
yes.
Say that again, Tito, I like it when you say
No,
it.
Micaela Maris Tamayo.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Micaela
Mika.
Maris Tamayo. There you go.
Every day.
Yeah.
She's so gracious about it.
And I understand, trust me.
Yeah.
Nobody gets me. Nobody.
You wanna sit here?
Nice to be in good company.
Yes, you are in great company.
Yeah, that's why I think it's
No, I
just
can
easier
go,
to go
really,
with
I can go somewhere else.
and Eric.
And Erica, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's so much
Knock
easier.
yourself out.
Better than being called Dr. Androgynous, which happens all.
Oh, dear.
Oh, wow.
Rose shellac.
The Rose shellac. Rose shellac. Oh, I love
That's
that.
how I tell them.
No, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here this morning. I'm Micaela Maris Tamayo. I'm accompanied by Dan Quinn, who's one of our newest members to the PCC family and is a research analyst specializing in equity with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. And then, of course, Sheila Rose, who's also a co-chair of our Student Success Committee. And I always like to preface anytime I'm given the opportunity to do a presentation like this, the fact that I am also the daughter of two PCC alumni. So my mom and my dad were the first in their families to pursue higher education, and they did so through Pasadena City College and then went on to transfer to their respective bachelor degree granting institutions. So I do sit here with you as Dr. Maris Tamayo, very much in recognition of the opportunities that were afforded to my family through this educational institution, and realizing it wasn't just about their individual experience, but the impact it then had on their community, our family, and kind of moving out from there. So It's in that same spirit that I'm here to present what's the collective work of many of our colleagues on this campus, which is our 2019-2022 Student Equity Plan. So just to give you an overview of what we'll cover this morning, I'll share some background on the equity plan and how it's situated within work that's already going on at the college and in the state. Then we'll share a bird's eye view of the data, which is a really, really large amount of information that we've been provided with in a rather short time frame, and so there's a lot more detail in the materials that were also forwarded to you through the full plan, but we'll kind of walk you through some of the key points, and then also give you an overview of our equity plan goals and the next steps that we'll be taking to achieve those goals, and welcome any discussion, questions, comments at the end. Okay. So in terms of some background, every California community college must have an equity plan that covers from 2019 to 2022, shares our current data on students' experiences, and then outlines how we are going to address and work to close equity gaps or where students experience disproportionate impact. Okay, so where they're experiencing less success in a given metric when compared to other groups. The due date for this assignment is June 30th, 2019. We received various iterations of the data starting about March 1st, and so a lot of credit to our Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and this is where Dan and Crystal and our colleagues, Destin and Khalil and Peter become very, very important in helping us to understand what we have in front of us. And just as a reminder, we know that the vision for success is sort of like the overarching kind of guidance that we have from the Chancellor's Office in terms of the work that's laid ahead of us between or up until 2027. Our local goals were really our opportunity to sort of think about how are we going to identify the progress that we want to make by the time we reach the halfway point of that 10-year vision for success timeline, which is to 2022. And then our equity plan is really, aligned within these two other efforts to think about how it is that we're specifically going to focus resources and intentional actions for supporting our students who are disproportionately impacted. So when we look at the data that we're given from the Chancellor's Office, we're also given some very specific instructions in terms of which student groups we analyze or how we kind of slice and dice the data. And in essence, when we're looking at our Lancers, we're looking at them by race and ethnicity, and of course we disaggregate that into various groups, and then there's some groups that are kept in aggregate. We look at current or former foster youth, LGBT students, and this is a newest kind of data element or availability that we have, so this is why it's coming up in this equity plan for the first time, because it previously wasn't released to us by the state. We also look at SES or economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and veterans. And then all of the above groups are further disaggregated into what are the current Chancellor's Office gender categories of female, male, and all. And all is inclusive of female, male, and then those who marked not reported or unknown. Or sorry, not reported unknown, which is either that they didn't identify with the two gender binary categories that are currently provided, or they just chose not to report, right? They didn't want to report. So with that having been said, there are 5 metrics that we're looking at in this current equity plan. It's different than previous equity plans, and we're looking at them differently. We've been, basically told to look at them a little bit differently, but we'll walk through what they are. So the first is enrollment, and that's essentially for all those students who marked on their application via CCC Apply that they intended to come here to PCC, how many of them actually came, right, during 17-18. Retention is essentially students who started with us in fall, how many came back in the spring, and it excludes anybody who, graduated, transferred, achieved those kinds of goals. Transfer level math and English refers to how many students completed transfer level math and transfer level English within their first year here at PCC. Completion is sort of shorthand for those students who received a certificate or degree. And then transfer is all those students who transfer to any type of bachelor degree granting institution. So in-state, out-of-state, public, private, they're all included within this transfer metric, which is different than our local goal, right? So if it sounds a little bit, if it sounds different, I won't say off, but if it sounds different from what you might have heard previously, that's because it is, and that's essentially the format that we're being told we have to work within, okay? So when we look at those 5 metrics, we essentially are looking at a student life cycle, right? The PCC student life cycle. So another way of representing it is if we think about the complete set of experiences that we would like for our students to have here, it starts with enrollment, right? We want them to come here. Once they come here, we want them to stay. It's retention. A next step would be, to encourage transfer level math and English completion within the first year. Because that sets them up for more successful goal completion overall. Then certificate or degree completion as a next step. After that, and or transfer, right? And so we know that it's not a linear progression like that for all of our students or even for us in our educational journeys, but in sort of like a perfect world, that's sort of the steps, how they would lay out chronologically. What we're going to share next is a bird's eye view of our equity data, and in particular showing where students are experiencing disproportionate impact and broken out by the groups that they identify with. And so we'll start off looking at our 2 largest racial and ethnic groups that experience disproportionate impact. The first one is our Black or African American students, and so as we disaggregate by gender, we see that Black African American females are experiencing disproportionate impact across all 5 of the metrics. And so that's represented by the borders being, kind of hashed out as opposed to just sort of like a solid border, and slightly lowered in the visual to show that they're experiencing a gap between what would be, kind of considered the overall progression. For Black or African American male students, they experience disproportionate impact in 4 of the metrics, all of the metrics except for transfer. And when we look at the aggregate of all Black or African American students, we again see disproportionate impact across all 5 metrics. And going back to, again, the student life cycle, when we look at our Latina, Latino, Latinx students who are currently, about 51% of our college population, Latina females are experiencing disproportionate impact in enrollment and transfer level math and English completion in the first year. Latino males are experiencing disproportionate impact in retention, transfer level math and English, and in transfer. And then when we look at the aggregate of all Latina, Latino, Latinx students, we see disproportionate impact experienced in transfer level math and English completion and transfer. So now we're going to move into the additional groups that we look at data for, and also understanding that students who identify as Black, who identify as Latinx, are also included in the groups that we're now, the identity markers that we're now going to be looking at. So students with disabilities, those who identified as female, experience disproportionate impact in transfer level math and English and transfer. The data shows that males, students with disabilities, are also experiencing disproportionate impact in transfer level math and English, and the same holds true when we look at the aggregate for students with disabilities. When we look at our current or former foster youth, those who identified as female, the data is showing disproportionate impact in enrollment and transfer level math and English completion. For our male foster youth, current or former foster youth, they're experiencing disproportionate impact in retention and transfer level math and English completion. And then when we look at all foster youth students, they're experiencing disproportionate impact in enrollment, retention, and transfer level math and English completion in the first year. When we look now at our LGBT students, those who identified as female are experiencing disproportionate impact in all of the metrics except for enrollment. When we look at LGBT male students, they experience disproportionate impact across all 5 metrics. And when we look at the aggregate of all LGBT students, we again see disproportionate impact across all 5 metrics. And then finally, when we look at our veteran students, we see disproportionate impact experienced by males in retention and transfer level math and English completion. Our data currently does not show any equity gaps or substantive disproportionate impact for female identified veteran students, but when we look at the aggregate of all veterans, then we do see, again, a disproportionate impact in retention and transfer level math and English. Okay. So with that having been said, again, when you look at the plan, there's a copious amount of data, and there's a lot that we were kind of working with, particularly in the Student Success Committee, where we have our representation from our faculty, our staff, our students, our managers. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to be very purposeful, and we didn't feel comfortable doing like a one-size-fits-all approach to goal setting. Because again, we have so much data, and we also really wanted to think very carefully about what is the data showing us, how do our goals align with our vision for success and local goal kind of setting, how large the gaps are, how large the student group is, what resources we may already have available in place at the college, what things we know are sort of coming down the pipeline or have been in the works. There's different centers that are going to be opening. There's a lot to kind of take into account. So when it came time to set those goals, what we did was we set very purposeful goals and informed goals, looking at our data and the trends and everything we were taking into account for each group, for each metric. There are certain strategies, though, that cut across all of those metrics and for all of the groups, and we felt were important to highlight because they allow us to be very intentional, but also to have some flexibility to be responsive to our students' needs, because again, this is a plan that's covering for 3 years. We have to be, we have to understand that. So the first sort of overarching strategy that cut across all of the metrics and activities is to continue the work that all of us here are involved in with institutional transformation and consistent opportunities for professional learning that are equity-minded and student-centered. The second strategy is to braid existing and emerging resources to further establish the impact of efforts that we see and have been engaged in here at our college. The third is to engage in inquiry and design to further strengthen existing resources and services and determine where additional innovations are needed. And then finally, to engage in inquiry to assess and evaluate the success of coordinated support activities. So being very mindful of the fact that we need students, we need staff, we need faculty, we need managers to be working together and really pause and have moments of reflection for what it is that we're doing and what progress we see that we're making, or where we need to kind of bump things up a little bit or sort of tinker very mindfully. So that having been said, that's the overview of the plan. So any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, I certainly welcome them, and our team welcomes them right now.
I have a question. I have an idea of how to measure 4 of these metrics. I'm not sure how an equity gap in enrollment is manifested or how it's measured. Can you briefly touch on that?
So that's an excellent question. And so the way that we're looking at that really, another thing I should have mentioned too, all of this also aligns very much with guided pathways and what we're just doing, as a state. And so one of the first kind of pillars of guided pathways is the idea of guided entry. And so what is it that we're doing to just sort of streamline the process for students once they apply and they say that they do want to come here, because there's so many steps involved in that. There's a lot of kind of this like hidden curriculum involved in terms of knowing when to go to what place and who do you talk to and what are they giving you and what are the follow-up kind of things that you have to do. So I think one of you can interject. I have more to say, but
So is it like we're losing people from the beginning point of filling out the application to actually becoming, like getting an ID card?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
That's-
that's a lost point. Sometimes they
Yeah.
get the ID card, but then they don't sign up for classes, or they don't know what classes to sign up for. Like, there's all these different pieces that come into it that, again, I think guided entry is really trying to grapple with. And then also, we're trying to put physical spaces in place. For example, when we have our welcome center during the summer, where that's like a one-stop kind of shop for getting a lot of those things done, but also that information shared with students that help them to then show up, August 25th or whenever it is, right, that
Yeah.
classes actually start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're also talking about having much more expanded registration support, so students don't really have a space typically on campus where they can get assistance with selecting the courses. The library often picks up the slack just because they have those computers, but the librarians aren't necessarily trained in that. So between the Welcome Center and establishing the first year student center, we will have teams trained to help them select the courses that will get them on the path to
Well,
complete.
sure, that all makes sense. I was just,
Yeah.
I didn't have an idea of what the base was, but it's started an application essentially. And that makes, now I get it.
It's completing the application and saying that you want to come to PCC.
Right,
And
and then
then
making sure that we
Actually.
can
get
actually see
them.
that happen. Thank you.
Mhm.
So at this point, do we need a motion to approve?
Yes, please.
Okay. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so, any discussion? I just want to say thank you. I know this has been a huge heavy lift, and thank you so much for all of your leadership, all of your work, and the work of everybody who got us to this point. This is huge, so thank you. Okay, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Alrighty, well, we got us an equity plan. Yay! SEA! Woohoo! SEA. All right,
Nice job.
yes.
Nice job.
Now it can go on that board agenda. June 19th, June 19th. Okay, new items, discussion and possible action. Standing committees that are not currently meeting. Crystal?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up, that College Council has standing committees for facilities and sustainability and health and safety and outcomes. None of these committees have met. Facilities and sustainability, health and safety have not met in 2 years. Outcomes has not met this year, because I think they're fairly new. I'm bringing this up because I learned at the ACCJC conference that if we have standing committees or shared governance groups that are not functioning or not working or don't meet our needs, we might want to reconsider them.
Well,
And now I'm leaving this to you.
yeah, so I would definitely like to see, in the fall especially, the reemergence of a facilities and sustainability committee, especially as we're looking at a facilities master plan and potentially going for a bond, because my hope is that some part of our attention to bond projects would involve sustainability. And so I think that we should get that started, definitely.
And with that, I remember I keep looking at the guidelines. I remember we voted our college council to combine those two, because they did have two separate ones. So it is even a smaller committee that's more, focused. But also on the outcomes, and I remember Terry and I had this conversation as well. It's one of the only committees, while it is new, their membership is very weird and unlike any of the other committees. So I'm not sure if they're gonna sit down and actually organize that so it's more cohesive with the rest of the standing committees of college
I
council.
can probably answer that question for you. The members of that committee were chosen rather intentionally based on our outcome needs and the current sort of challenges we face. But we do have to get some of the college-wide advertised coordinator positions, for example, sorted out before that can meet with any degree of confidence. So there are a couple of extraneous issues that have prevented that committee from meeting, but we need it desperately, and we need those particular people on it, because we can't have a conversation about institutional outcomes, for example, without those people in the room.
Yeah.
If I can just add, so when Tito and I were talking about that, it wasn't an issue with the list of members, it was an issue of the way it was listed, because it was using a different format than all of the other standing committees, and so it just needs to be reworded so that it that it looks like the other standing committees in that regard. And then the other thing I would add is that's something that I can work with Senate exec in getting that going, because obviously we do need to have that committee up and running. So I'll work with Lenore on making that happen. I also, and so I wasn't part of the conversation in regard to, you said that there once was a facilities and a sustainability committee separate. I question why that's together. I think that makes it difficult. I was involved in a sustainability committee in a past life, and if our sustainability committee is really doing what it should do, that's a huge task, and it shouldn't be linked with facilities, because even though there are some things that cross over, there's a lot of things that don't.
Okay, well, the reason I was looking at having those together was efficiency of membership, in case the same people were interested in both. But I appreciate your comments, because I too was involved in that in a previous life, and you're right, the kinds of directions that a sustainability committee, the kinds of issues that they take up are not necessarily, though they could take a facilities committee off a track of trying to look at a big picture rather than the sustainability. So at this point, what happens when we have these? Do people articulate their interest in being on them, or how did they get appointed?
Well, since this is your committee and these are your standing committees, if you want them to still exist, I'll put out a call that they need to start meeting.
Okay.
Do you want to split facilities and sustainability?
Well, I think we should start out by splitting it and see if there's a.
Can I say,
Yes.
let's have a little bit more conversation before we do
Okay.
that? I don't, I can guess at what the logic was behind why that happened, but I don't know for sure if that happened. I think it would be helpful, because I have not looked at what this committee is supposed to do. But so I would say, before you make my recommendation to you is, before you say let's split
Okay.
it, let's have a little bit further conversation about that, because there is a relationship.
Okay.
And I hate to be the one arguing for more committees.
Oh, no, I think that's definitely what you were doing. I think it's very clear. That's your goal. Yeah,
We also have a new CBO coming in,
that's true.
so this may be something
And
he
you
wants
might
to.
have
And this is something that we could take up,
Yes.
next month or over the
Of
summer.
course, I
Okay.
just like to bring it to your attention.
And then
I also
how-
wanted to make it perfectly clear that even though I was talking about the Sustainability and Facilities Committee, and I was indicating that I had experience in that, I am not indicating that the Vice President of Instruction should have anything whatsoever.
Oh, I was going to appoint you the chair. And then the health and safety, and that has not met for a long time, I take it? Okay. I think that's also another one where we should talk to the incoming chief business officer, because often those kinds of issues are brought up through that chain, although there needs to be an opportunity for anybody to highlight health and safety issues. So that's a stay tuned on that one.
Okay.
Okay, and then also, standing committee annual summaries and end of year evaluation.
Correct. And anybody who chairs a standing committee will remember this, that you have to write an annual summary that gets posted on your shared governance page after your last meeting. Just a summary of everything that you did throughout the year, so if people just want a quick look at what happened in that committee, that there's a summary. I'll write yours for college council, and then we have a lot of others. So if everybody, I'll send out a notice that needs to be done. And also, I will be sending out the end of year committee evaluation probably within the next 2 weeks. So please take that. And that goes out to the committee members for each standing committee.
Okay. And then last, accreditation as a standing item on governance agendas.
I'm
So-
gonna let Lenore do this.
In the accreditation standing committee, we discussed the idea of having Accreditation listed not only as a standing item, but also as a comment field in the template that we use for our shared governance committees for those agendas. Yeah, so it would look like that, that way. If there wasn't an explicit accreditation concern in the agenda itself, at the very least, that discussion of how the discussions that are agendized overlap with accreditation could be noted. And we figured it was a good idea not just for shared governance agendas, but all governance agendas on campus to have that recommendation come out.
And I would like to speak in favor of this because we are 18 months, 19 months away from our next comprehensive ACCJC visit, and one of the tasks that we have in front of us is to ensure that everyone is aware about what's happening with accreditation. And this is a really great way to make everyone aware that, and ideally it's an ongoing practice. It's not just because we're 18 months away. We're gonna do this 18 months and beyond, because accreditation is an ongoing concern. It's not just because we're gearing up to a comprehensive visit, so.
Additionally, it enables the campus community to understand how the role that they play on a committee relates to our
Exactly.
accreditation.
Yep. Fun, fun, fun. Who's excited? Who's with me? It's fun. We're gonna have fun, I'm telling you. I believe in making accreditation fun. Okay. Any announcements? Tito?
After you all are done having fun with the opening of the Freeman Center, from 12 to 1, Pat Blaze is hosting our spring annual poster conference in Creveling Lounge. Because of the weather, we had to get out of the quad, so fortunately we were able to move stuff around. Hopefully you all saw David's email this morning. Student Health Center was very cooperative in helping us with that. So they will be filming the S Word in Harbison Hall, and we will now be in Creveling Lounge. So if you want to help either as a judge or just simply see our students' research this spring semester on the book Little Nations and Other Stories, we're more than happy to have you present.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just the Senate banquet, where we will be celebrating our retiring faculty and also awarding, along with the foundation, a number of awards for our outstanding teacher and support to instruction, and also our President's 10+1 awards. That will be June 6th. It's a Thursday evening from 6 to 9 p.m. at Eden Garden, and tickets are currently available at the Student Bank for purchase.
And I guess I'll also make this announcement that I believe they are still looking for submissions for the cookbook. So if you have not put in some recipes, I have put in 2 recipes.
Oh.
So come on, folks, let's get some recipes in there. This is gonna be good.
Meat seasoning pasta.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, my favorite thing
Awesome.
to eat is literally just pasta, like regular
You're welcome.
heated. And then you dry it, and then after, once it cools down, just have sour cream and meat seasoning.
That's Eden
Or
Eden
if
Garden on all
That's okay.
streets.
I do. The good
You
thing
know,
though is that
I was talking to her, I'm like, I remember when I saw that, I like, I know we talked about it. Easy stuff. Send it to me.
I had 10 minutes.
Oh, you'll see what the actual.
Restaurant has enough food
Literally,
already.
add to that.
Now it's my turn.
And they're gonna bring up some
I can sit here for
fish
a
from
minute or two, and then I'll go up there. It's so sorry, and then I present at 12,
Haven't had a
so.
chance to read it yet.
Then I want to read it
Yes,
to the.
but for,
Well, the new one, I haven't been to the new one yet.
$15 million facility.
Yeah.
And it's huge. You can buy as much.
I got, well, no, because as the president, I haven't done that. That's what it's
I'm
called.
the vice chair right now. I'll
And there's a
come in here and then I'll be the chair.
senator that
Negotiations.
That's insane.
Sam knows that in the full
Oh my God.
IPA,
It's